So I know that you've had several other missionaries already. So I want to apologize in advance if I'm preaching the same message that they do, because I got online and I listened. Some of them are quite good, so I figured, why not? Maybe I can improve upon those messages. But the Bible is an old book, but it's not just a book. It's an amazing book. It's a living book. And so you might hear something that you've heard preached before, but I pray that God will speak to you in a brand new way. So turn to Mark chapter number 6 if you have your Bible. If you don't have your Bible, listen hard, okay? So Mark chapter 6, verse number 45. We'll just read 7 verses in Mark chapter 6, verse number 45. And I pray that God would touch your heart in the way of missions. I already know this church is a mission-minded church because you guys have a big, huge poster out there that's super fantastic, and I already took a picture of it so that I can use it for myself and just change the language on it. So Mark chapter 6, verse number 45, the Bible says, "And straightway he constrained his disciples to get into the ship and to go to the other side unto Bethsaida, while he sent away the people. And when he had sent them away, he departed into a mountain to pray. And when even was come, the ship was in the midst of the sea, and he alone on the land. And he saw them toiling and rowing, for the wind was contrary unto them. And about the 4th watch of the night he cometh unto them, walking upon the sea, and would have passed by them. But when they saw him walking upon the sea, they supposed it had been a spirit, and cried out. For they saw him and were troubled, and immediately he talked with them, and saith unto them, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And he went up unto them into the ship, and the wind ceased, and they were sore amazed in themselves beyond measure, and wondered. For they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. And when they had passed over, they came into the land of Gennesaret, and drew to the shore. In verse number 7 of the same chapter, the disciples were sent out by Jesus like missionaries. And he had a mission. He sent them out 2 by 2, and he sent them out and said, hey, do such and though. And in verse number 30, they came back and gave their missionary report, okay? And I'm not preaching about those verses, but I wanted to tell you about them. I think so if anybody else has a missionary sermon, you might want to do those. So verse number 31, they went to a desert place. In verse number 45, Jesus made them get into a boat that he knew would be in the middle of a storm. You understand that, right? Jesus made them get into a boat, and he knew a storm would come. Why in the world would Jesus do such a thing to people he loves? For a lesson, to teach them, to help their faith to grow. So if you have a storm you're in the middle of, I want you to know that Jesus is there with you. And if you're not in the middle of a storm, you're probably about to go into a storm, or you're coming out of a storm, okay? We have lots of storms in our life, okay? Even people who love Jesus have storms, okay? I really love Jesus. I have a bunch of storms, okay? So Jesus, in verse number 46, he was exhausted. He was tired. He decided to step away, and his tiredness and his exhaustion drove him to prayer. Many times in our lives, the exhaustion, the tiredness, the stress that we have drives us away from prayer. Well, maybe not you spiritual people, but me sometimes drives me further from God, and that's not exactly what he's trying to do. So verse number 48, it says that in John, according to John chapter 6, verse number 19, they had rowed much of the night. Someone says about 4 hours, and they'd only gotten about halfway. Have you ever rowed and struggled and worked and feel like you've worked so hard and you've gotten nowhere? Let me just tell you, sometimes in Thailand, it seems like we work so hard and try to tell as many people about Christ, and it just seems like we just have gained no ground. Maybe at work, you're trying to climb the corporate ladder. Maybe you're trying to raise a family, and it seems like you're working as hard as you can, and you're getting nowhere. You're just treading water. Maybe you're serving God. The disciples were veteran fishermen. They had been in a boat. They knew what they were doing. They had handled storms before, and it seems like they could accomplish nothing in this particular moment. In verse number 49, it says that Jesus would have passed them by, but they cried out. Aren't you glad that whenever you're in trouble, you're struggling, and when you cry out, that Jesus doesn't just pass us by? I don't know if he asked for you, but man, goodness gracious, I cry out for him a whole bunch. In verse number 51, the wind stopped. And John chapter 6:21, which has the same story, explains that immediately they were on the other side. They worked hard rowing for hours and hours, but when God got involved, they were immediately had accomplished their goal. Sometimes we try to do stuff on our own. Sometimes I try to do things on my own, and I can't get anything done. God steps in, and he reminds me that he is in control. In verse number 51, it says that they were so amazed that something like that had happened. Why were they amazed when they had experienced so many miracles? Verse number 52 says, "For they considered not the miracle of the loaves." I think maybe we may make that mistake also and forget about the miracles that God has bestowed upon us. So let's look at the miracle of the loaves and the fishes. Several years ago, goodness, I can't remember how long it was, my family and I, or actually my wife and I and some young professionals, we were eating at the Cheesecake Factory over there in Southlake. We took them on activity, began to eat something, and I enjoy trying everyone else's food. I don't know if you like that. I know other people don't like that when I do it, but I like to order what I want, convince someone else to order something, my second choice, so I can try that. So I was trying all the food, and all of a sudden I started not to feel well, and I got quite sick, and an ambulance came, had to get me. I had an acute anaphylactic reaction. I almost died in the ambulance. They took me to the hospital. I spent about 3 or 4 days in ICU. And after that point, they gave me an EpiPen, and they say, "Hey, if this ever happens again, stab yourself in the leg," which is pretty weird. But if you don't want to die, it's something you might consider. Every day, that hey, if we left the house, hey, did you have your EpiPen? Oh man, let's go back. I don't want to die today. Today, I don't carry it anymore. Why? That event is so far away. It was a big deal for a long time, and I was sure scared every single thing I ate. I can't go back to a Cheesecake Factory, I'll tell you that. But it's possible that thing that God rescued me from, that I could have died, that I was so scared of, that I forgot about those things. I don't even know where my EpiPen is. I don't know if I had one the last several years, because I considered not that particular event. So let's look at the miracle of the loaves and the fishes real quick. Now, you've heard this story before. You guys here on Wednesday night, you've heard the loaves and the fishes taught and preached so many times. You already know how many loaves, you already know how many fishes, you know the kid. I understand all that. But if we knew it all, we just never would read our Bible anyways, right? We already know it all. So why don't we consider it once again tonight? In Mark chapter 6, verse number 34, it says this: "And Jesus, when he came out, he saw much people and was moved with compassion towards them, because they were as sheep not having a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. And when the day was now far spent, his disciples came unto him and said, 'This is a desert place, and now the time is far past. Send them away, that they may go into the country round about and into the villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat.' He answered and said unto them, 'Give ye them to eat.' And they say unto him, 'Shall we go and buy 200 pennyworth of bread and give them to eat?' He saith unto them, 'How many loaves have ye? Go and see.' And when they knew, they say 5, and then also 2 fishes. He commanded them to make all sit down by companies upon the green grass, and they sat down in ranks by hundreds and fifties. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, he looked up to heaven and blessed and brake the loaves and gave them to all the disciples to set before them. And the 2 fishes divided he among them all. And they did all eat and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets of the fragments of the fishes, and they did eat the loaves that were about 5,000 men." For tonight, for just a moment, I'll preach short. I have a bit of a throat problem. Pastor Webster said if I wasn't done at a certain time, he was going to cut my throat. So, that's such an old, dumb joke. I can't help but not say it. It's so dumb, but my family hates that joke, but I think it's pretty good. So, for a moment, number one, let's consider the food. Consider the food. You had loaves, you had bread, and you had fish. Consider the bread. Man, you ever heard that you're supposed to lose weight and cut bread? Man, that's horrible, isn't it? You can't eat bread. Just imagine not being able to eat bread. White bread. Man, in Thailand, we can buy white bread, or we can buy bread where they already cut the crust off the bread already. Can you imagine not having to deal with crust? Sourdough bread. Cinnamon butter on top of the rolls at the place where you throw the peanuts on the ground bread. The big thick bread, the toast, what's that called? That's right, it's called Texas toast. It ain't called Oklahoma toast or Arkansas toast or Louisiana toast. Why? Texas toast. Biscuits with just a big lake of sausage gravy on top of that. Bread. They even make bread into a bowl so you can eat food out of your food. What in the world? But you know that just regular old ordinary bread just only sustains us for just a certain amount of time. Now, I looked up this word. This is a school word, okay? And I'm going to say it wrong, and you're going to tell me I said it wrong, and I already know I'm going to say it wrong, but I already studied it 5 times, and I can't remember how to say it. So I'm going to say it. You correct me later, but not right now. Satiety. Satiety. That is a root word where we get satisfaction. This word, which I know a lot of you smart people know, but I'm not, I'm just trailer trash, and you don't want to know how I grew up. But satiety, there's an index, and it depends on how much food satisfies you, meaning it's a state of non-eating characterized by the absence of hunger, which follows at the end of the meal and arises from the consequences of food ingestion. If you eat boiled potatoes, that has like an index of 300, okay? If you eat broccoli, super low and not fun, okay? But the level is either over 100 or under 100. Do you know what sits at 100? 100%? Bread, white bread. That's what they measure everything by, is bread. Bread gives you satisfaction, but regular bread only satisfies for just a little bit. John 6:35 says this, and Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. Not regular bread. Texas toast is nice. Biscuits and gravy are awesome, but I'm talking about supernatural bread, special bread, satisfying bread. Jesus. Better bread than any Olive Garden, all-you-can-eat breadsticks, jamming it in the dressing or a side of the sauce so you can stick that in. Better than any of that bread. Jesus Christ. Consider the bread. Now consider the fish. I had to look this up on the internet as well. Fish is a low-fat, high-quality protein. Fish is filled with omega-3 fatty acids and vitamins such as D, B12, riboflavin. Fish is rich in calcium and phosphorus and a great source of minerals such as iron, zinc, iodine, magnesium, and potassium. Bread is our eternal life. And I look at fish as being our abundant life. Now, we're supposed to receive Jesus Christ and have eternal life. But he didn't just save us just to let us sit. We're supposed to have abundant life. John 10:10 says, for the thief cometh not for to steal and to kill and destroy, but I am come that they may have life and have it more abundantly. Folks, our goal is to bring the gospel to as many Thai people as we can, and this is one reason why. Most Thai homes and neighborhoods have a spirit house in and around the neighborhood. And that spirit house is to house ghosts and spirits that protect the neighborhood. And so that those ghosts and spirits will protect the neighborhood, they offer offerings to those ghosts and spirits inside the spirit house. I know it sounds crazy to you, but it's real to many people in Thailand. You will see fruits and vegetables and coconut and rice sat at the doorstep of these spirit houses. But one thing you'll see at almost every spirit house is red Fanta. You know the Fanta soda? Red Fanta. They will be sat there in bottles, in cups, with straws for the ghosts and the spirits to drink. In an article in the Bangkok Post, an office worker was asked, why do you put the red Fanta? And it says, well, if you're really wanting a raise at work, or if there's something terrible happening in your family or someone's very sick, you can't go and slaughter a chicken and put it on the altar. So the next best thing is to offer red Fanta that looks like blood so that you'll allow those spirits and angels to help you. Thailand is a country that is smaller than the state of Texas. They only have about 70 million people. And they are Fanta's 4th largest market. Bigger than the Fanta market of United States and China. Why? Because they buy the red Fanta to offer to the spirits and to the ghosts. With this worldview, you can imagine how difficult it is to communicate the redemptive work of Jesus Christ in the country of Thailand. Those folks, us folks, need to consider the food, consider the bread, consider the fish. Next, let's consider the people. Verse number 34, and Jesus, when he came out, saw much people and was moved with compassion towards them because they were sheep not having a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. He was moved with compassion. He saw them and said, these people are sheep and they have no one to help them. And his first instinct was he began to teach them. Before he fed them, he taught them. There is much people. I just looked it up right before I came here. Right now, it's estimated about 331 million people in America. In Thailand, it has grown since we began on the field. About 72 million people right now in Thailand. In Bangkok alone, the greater metro Bangkok area, we have around 12 million people. And every time I get on a train or a bus, I feel it. It's packed. And then I also looked up in this Sherman-Denison area, about 120,000 people. That's a lot of folks. We have much people. And it's our job to do our best to reach those people. We have a lot of people in our home. Many times, every single week, we'll have people in our home. One thing, I really like to barbecue. I like to grill. I like to cook. I like to do that, and so I enjoy it. And it's also a great way to minister to people. Have them over. Hey, have food and hang out. We'll have discipleship over at our house, and they know if they're coming over here, they're going to eat something. One of the teenagers came over and said, "What are we going to eat?" They go, "You're going to the Cones. You're going to eat something." And so that's just something we can do. Many times in our home, we've had at least 50 plus people, cooked for all of them, had them in there in our home during Christmas and the holidays, different stuff like that. 4th of July, we have a whole bunch of missionaries family come to our house. We play cornhole and a whole bunch of American stuff like that. But 50 people is hard. And maybe we could do 100. But if 5,000 people showed up, we're out. And that's why they had to make it such a big number. If you said, hey, we fed 100 people bread and fish, okay, we can give them a little bit and you can probably do it. But 5,000, there's no way with that amount. Jesus had to make it a great amount so they could see that it was a great miracle. Folks, today in this world, we have many people. And if you haven't looked outside your door, these folks are lost. I mean, double dog lost. More lost than they've ever been lost before. And they are searching for something. You can see the way they dress, the way they look, the way they act. They are searching for something, and they are searching for something to worship. There's also many different type of people. And he commanded, verse number 39, he commanded them to make all to sit down. Some reason Jesus didn't pick and choose who got to have some fish and some bread. He didn't look upon them and say, well, you know what? That's just going to be a waste of time. Why in the world would we feed them anything? They're not going to listen, not going to pay attention. He said, hey, I want everybody to sit down. The good ones, the bad ones, rich ones, the poor ones, the ugly ones, handsome ones. Those that knew the Bible, those that had never heard. Criminals, rejects, brokenhearted. Our church ought to be a hospital for the broken people and allow them all to sit down and at least have a chance, at least have an opportunity to hear about the bread and the fish. They were all invited to eat. And I believe in that crowd there were some special people. I know there was a special boy, but I bet in that crowd there were some special people that got to eat that day, turn their life over to Christ. Who knows what they were able to accomplish. I know we have some special people at the church that we've served at for years. Everyone in Thailand has a nickname. It's probably because their real name's so hard to pronounce, but I know that for sure. But everyone has a nickname. There's a family in our church, and they have 3 daughters. They're all grown now. But the oldest daughter, her nickname is C. Middle daughter, her nickname is B. And the youngest daughter nickname is A. I have no idea how they went C, B, and A, and he got it all planned out. But this guy's a genius. But his wife's name is Un. When I began to learn Thai, I heard the word Un, and we call her P. If you speak to someone that's older, it's P in their name. If they're younger, it's Nong in their name. It's just a respect thing we have there in Thailand. Her name is P Un. P means Mr. or Mrs., something like that. But I heard Un, and I was like, man, that sounds a lot like a word I just learned in language school, which means fat. And I said, so you're telling me her name is Mrs. Fat? And I go, I ain't calling no woman fat. I was like, I don't know how many women it's going to take me down, but I guarantee I call one fat, she can probably whoop my tail. And so I'm like, no, that's her name. That's her name is Mrs. Fat. And that's what we call her. We have a little girl that came to our English class for a long time, nicknamed iPhone. I was asking the boys one time in a class, and I said, hey, what's your name? And this guy said, hey, my name's Fluke. I said, well, that's funny. I said, that sounds like an English word. It means like a mistake or an accident. And he goes, yeah, I know. There's some special people. There's one little boy, first little boy I ever led to Christ. And I remembered, I explained to him, I said, hey, you must so you must choose Christ. You can't have Jesus and Buddha. You have to choose him and him only. Till you're ready to do that, we can't discuss any further. And he goes, I'm ready to choose Jesus. And I was like, hold on. And I went to get another guy that could speak Thai better than me. And he sat down and he began to explain to him about salvation. And he turned to me and he goes, what's the problem? This guy wants to get saved. He goes, yeah, I know. I just don't want to mess it up. And he goes, oh, okay. And he led that boy to Christ with my cheering over his shoulder. There's a young man, Joe, you saw in our video. And I talked to him several times. And I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And one day we had noodle soup day man, I love noodle soup day. You get noodles, skinny noodles keep you skinny, fat noodles keep you fat, and you put it in your bowl, and then you go over to the big pot, and you get whatever meat they cooked for the today. Who knows what it'll be? Chicken feet, cow innards, who knows? No, not cow, that's too expensive, it would be pig. So you get those bits, you put it in your bowl, you put the vegetables in there, you go back to the big stock pot in the kitchen, and you get the soup, boiling hot soup, put it in there. Man, I love noodle soup day. And Joe's girlfriend at the time said, hey, Ajahn, which is pastor, Ajahn, Joe is ready. I said, man, I am ready too. I already had one bowl of soup. I can't. No, he's ready to accept Jesus. Okay, well, soup can wait. Let's talk to Joe. Special people. In this particular story, the little boy gave his bread and his fish. And the disciples, great men that they were, had been sent out, will experience miracles, involved in miracles. We'll do great things for God. But in this moment, all they were waiters. All they were carrying bread and fish to the people. That's all they were, just waiters. I didn't think they probably didn't get a tip. Man, I come back to America and they got an iPad, and those people don't do a single thing. I pay for my stuff, and I got to give them a tip. They didn't do anything, but whatever. So, but they're walking around waiters, and all these disciples, great men of God, were just handing out bread and fish. That's all they were, just waiters. I think we could probably be pretty good waiters, and maybe we need to be handing out some more bread and some more fish to the people that are not starving for the gospel. Can you imagine that if the disciples were to do this and to come to the first row and give them bread and fish, go to the second row, give them bread and fish, the third row, give them bread and fish, and they get lazy, they come back to the first row and give them bread and fish, and the second row, and the people in the back go, hey, where's our bread and fish? We're starving. And they just keep on going to the front row. Folks in Thailand are on the back row wondering where their bread and fish is. And they don't care who will come and bring it to them. They'll even let a guy like me that butchers the language every single day. They'll listen to somebody because it's something new, it's something amazing, it's something better. Because it's not just white bread, it's amazing bread. So consider the food, consider the people, and then consider the leftovers. It says they did all eat and were filled. Have you ever eaten as much as you can and you're so full you can't eat another bite? And then you go ahead and do it? That's the best, isn't it? But leftovers, generally, you go to a restaurant and you order a whole bunch of food and you have a whole bunch of leftovers, and guess what? You take those leftovers and you bring them home, you put them in the fridge, and cool off that garbage before you throw it away, right? We do that all the time, right? Hey, I don't want to throw my leftovers here at the restaurant. I'll wait till I get to the house, cool them down, then throw them away at the house. So everyone was totally full. And they were full of bread and fish. But before they got the bread and fish, they got the bread of life. Jesus taught them, and they heard the gospel. And they were all full. Ladies and gentlemen, when was the last time that you felt full after church? You come to church empty, and you leave full. When's the last time? And you go, well, the preacher just ain't preaching. The music just went on. It just, maybe you didn't bring anything to put it in. Maybe you left empty because you didn't bring anything to put it in. When is the last time, just in your life, you felt full? I can't stand anymore. God's been so good to me. And you said, man, it's been a rough time for me in my house. Man, I can imagine. I've had those days, had those weeks, had them months, had those years. In Proverbs 23:5, it says, thou preparest a table for me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, and my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. If I'd changed my focus, most of my days, my cup's running over. But many times I just look down and say, God, man, my cup's just empty. It's not. It's just me. I remember the last time my wife, her cup was running over. A mom of one of our church members hadn't been to church in years. We talked to her, convinced her, come on, come back to church. It's all right, come back. About 2 or 3 weeks before he came back, she came back to church finally. My wife found her, hugged her. We don't hug in Thailand. We don't touch in Thailand. Husband and wives don't even hold hands, which is fine with me. But you don't hug. My wife's hugging and crying all over this woman. Cup was running over. But if you were focused on yourself and all your problems, you'd probably think the cup was pretty empty. Leftovers. Consider the food, consider the people, consider the leftovers. Lastly, consider the great command. Jesus, everybody said we had a problem. Jesus said, give them to eat, feed them. He wasn't so interested in how, but he knew they needed to get fed. Now listen, I understand you have faith promise and it seems like a large amount. How are you going to get it? 300,000. I assume you meant 300,000, not $300. I assume 300,000. That is a lot of cabbage, okay? I've never seen 300,000 in my life. I reckon I'm not going to either. That's a lot of donuts. And that seems like, how are we going to get that done? I have no idea. But you know what Jesus said? Give them to eat. You got to feed them. Figure it out. And some Philip, man, that knuckleheads, what are we going to do? Get 200 penny worth of bread? That's a year's wage is what he brought. We're just going to gather up a year's wage. I don't know how he figured up that amount. He just figured, hey, I'll just give a big amount. And Jesus was like, yeah, that's a big amount. We can't do that. He wasn't concerned with that. He said, hey, those people need to get fed. They're saying, hey, where's my bread and fish? The Bible says, give ye them to eat. Consider the food, consider the people, consider the leftovers, consider the great command. I want you to consider what part you will have in missions. And I'll tell you one story, and then we'll go, okay? Because I'm ready for second dinner right about now. So, my grandpa served in World War II. I found that out a few years ago. I went back, and I don't know if you have a family member that keeps track of everything in your family, but I have an aunt that keeps clippings and everything else. Found out my grandfather was in World War II. Let me tell you about Ralph Cohn. Ralph Cohn served with the American Border Guard near Czechoslovakia. The Saturday Evening Post is an old magazine for some of you younger folks and me. They had an article about Ralph Cohn. And him and the other military police took down a chain of communist criminals on the German border. Ralph Cohn, he died in an accident while serving in the military. Sounds like a great guy. But Ralph Cohn wasn't my uncle. He wasn't my grandfather. He was my great uncle. He was my grandfather's brother. Let me tell you about Kenneth Cohn, okay? 25-year military career, Bronze Star, medal for 3 Army Accommodation Medals, Good Conduct Medal, World War II Campaign Medal, Asiatic and Pacific Campaign Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, Vietnam Service Medal, Korean Campaign Medal. Kenneth Cohn. Man, that guy has a chest full of stuff right there. But Kenneth Cohn was my grandpa's other brother. Let me tell you about Harold Cohn, my grandfather. Harold Cohn was a Course B mess sergeant in the Army. My grandfather was just a cook. And it come about that apparently he wasn't a very good cook. And I've talked to some other military men, and they said there ain't no good cooks in any military branch either. But my grandfather, he was just a cook. His other 2 brothers had medals and articles written about them and were heroes. But my grandfather, he just cooked food. Ralph Cohn was a war hero. Kenneth Cohn received all the medals, and Grandpa Harold was just a cook. But on December 31st, 1946, every man that served in World War II received a World War II victory medal. Ralph Cohn, Kenneth Cohn, and the cook Harold Cohn all three received a World War II victory medal. You're telling me the guy who just cooked biscuits and gravy got the same medal that the man that fought on the front line? Same. So I want to know what part you'll have in missions. And we all can't go to Thailand, but man, you are welcome to come, as many as you want. The pastor will allow you to come and empty out the church. You're all welcome to come, but we just can't all go. Someone else has got to stay here. And if you're saying, well, I'm just not a preacher, I'm not a teacher, I can't sing in the choir, I know. But Grandpa Harold, all he could do was just cook. And you know what? He helped win World War II. Why? Because he got a victory medal. They wouldn't have given that for just nothing, would they? He served the only way he knew how. So what are you going to do? You can either be a go missionary, a co-missionary, or a no missionary. If you would, please bow your head and close your eyes. And I want you to consider those things, because if you don't, you'll make the mistake of the disciples and not consider the amazing things that God has for you. I want you to consider the food. I want you to consider the people. I want you to think about the leftovers in your life, and I want to think about that great command where Jesus said, I want you to give them food to eat. And imagine for just a moment the people on the back row thinking, hey, we have had no fish, we have had no bread, where's ours? And I want you to get in on this thing called missions. I'm going to pray, and I hope God has spoken to your heart, and you'll take a moment just to speak back to Him. But if God didn't speak to your heart, maybe you take time and say, God, maybe you speak to me about missions. My faith promise, what do you want me to give? What do you want me to do? Maybe you're here, and God has been speaking to you about going. I pray that you'd speak back to Him. I'm going to pray and then ask you in just a moment to stand with your heads bowed and your eyes closed and have a time of invitation.